I feel like class reunions at the University of Wisconsin are a little different than yours at Spelman. Very, very little twerking, first of all.
Listen, I tell you all the time I have really good knees, and so I that's what this weekend was made for. For those who may not have seen, I went back to Atlanta for the first time since before the pandemic. Actually, I think the last time I was there was either 2017 or 2018
Oh, wow.
for homecoming, and so it was really exciting to be back. It was super crowded, but I had a fantastic time. It was like chicken soup for the soul. Like I just got to see so many people who were so instrumental in my life during college and have been instrumental in, championing me on, and hopefully it's a reciprocal relationship. And so it's just really great to see. And I also got to take my nephew to Spelman and Morehouse and to a step show and to tailgate. And so
we have a lot of white listeners and viewers, and we got to tell them what these things are. So
yes.
First of all, Spelman and what's the men's school?
Yes.
Morehouse.
So there's the Atlanta University Center, which is comprised of Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, Morris Brown College, the interdenominational theological seminary, and then Morehouse School of Medicine. And they are all historically Black colleges and universities. And so Spelman is a women's college that was founded on April 11th, 1881 in the basement of Friendship Baptist Church by 10 women and 1 girl. And Morehouse College was founded in February, I believe it's like around February 14th of 1867. And it is the only historically Black college for men. There is a historically Black college for women also in North Carolina named Bennett. And so this weekend was our homecoming. And as part of the tradition, we have a tailgate. Very few people attend the game as compared to the people who attend the tailgate. But we do like to see the band. So I made sure my nephew got to see that. And then we also do a step show for the sororities and fraternities in the evening. And there are lots of other activities that happen on campus. And so it's just a wonderful experience to come back. And so
can you explain what a step show is? I think there are a number of people who might not know.
Yes, absolutely. So it is essentially a step show is when usually sororities and fraternities, although at Spelman and Morehouse, lots of things can have step shows. So your dorm might have a step show. And your freshman class might have regional step shows, but it's essentially where you do syncopated clapping and stomping to a beat together with a group. And you call out chants while you do it. And it's a fun way of just being able to work in a team. It's sort of a combination of dancing and like rhythmic beat making with your body.
And almost like there's like a cheer element to it almost.
Yes.
It is incredibly cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I stepped when I was in college, and my sorority step team, Alpha Kappa Alpha, did win the step show. Oh. So I was most proud to bring my nephew and for him to see my team win. They did a fantastic job.
Cool. So okay. What now? Actually, like, so any highlights? Any like. Some amazing fucking people have gone through Spelman. So like, did you end up running into anyone?
Yes. So while I was there, so there was obviously a truck for Raphael Warnock, who was running for U.S. Senate against Herschel Walker, and he is a Morehouse graduate, I believe, class of 1991 or 92. And then also Stacey Abrams. And so I actually have a really great shirt that says Stacey Abrams.
She's running for governor again?
She's running for governor of Georgia, yes. And the polls have her up, so fingers crossed. She's the Spelman alumna, and so we're really excited about her. And so they had, buses out, people were out. I got a nice shirt that says "No More Play in GA," which is the play on a song that came out when I was in college. And it's all about, voting for her, and her face is on it. So that's been my sleep shirt every night since homecoming. And I also ran into Jermaine Dupree, who was there in a booth.
As you do.
As you do. Ran into Angelina Jolie. Her daughter is a freshman at Spelman. So she was out at the tailgate, ran into a friend of mine. He actually crossed Alpha Phi Alpha the same year that I crossed Alpha Kappa Alpha, and he is the current mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, Randall Woodfin.
Oh,
So we
cool.
got to hang out. He actually, the fun story here is that our other friend George, who is a musician and an entertainer, he's known as George 2.0, and he flew a drone into my arm, and he was really apologetic as he was watching this drone. And I thought it was just scratched a little bit. And so I walked away from that part of the tent, and I walk over, and the first words out of Randall's mouth are, "Flo, you're bleeding." And I look down and my arm is bleeding, and he's grabbing napkins. And I turn to my nephew and I'm like, "This is my friend Randall. He's the mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. And the first thing you're going to know about him is that he's patching me up at tailgate." This is what the Spelman and Morehouse experience is about.
Absolutely incredible. So actually, you could probably confirm my theory on the different experiences of homecomings. You got your graduate degree or degrees at Michigan, which is basically the sister school of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Do you ever go back for homecomings?
I do. I don't go back necessarily for homecoming, but I usually have gone back to meet up with friends to go to a game.
Okay.
I've done that a couple times.
So different vibe than Spelman?
Yes, very different vibe than Spelman. Everybody goes to the game, whereas literally the joke is always at the end of the night, somebody will post in a group chat and be like, "Who won?" Most of the time we don't even know who's playing. That's how out of the loop we are about it.
Oh, that's funny.
When I said I was
Big Ten is super football crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. When I said I was actually going to go to the game this year, people were like, "Why?"
Oh.
Very different vibe. In fact, what usually happens is if you're at a Big Ten school, people go to the game and then they leave during halftime to go to the bathroom and get snacks. At an HBCU, people don't attend the game and they show up at halftime to see the band and then leave when that's over. It's a very different vibe.
Oh my God. I love everything about this, but I think we should probably get started on the show.
We should absolutely start the show. Let's do it.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa. Flo coming from out east. Where are you right now?
I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am at my godmother's house, my Aunt True, and I'm hanging out here working first half of the week, and then I'm off the last 2 days. Having a little early birthday party tomorrow night with my family and friends. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I'm glad we're doing an earlier episode for the people on Pacific side, or it doesn't matter for any of you because you're all going to receive it at the same time. But this is early-ish enough in the night for you out east, so that's kind of nice.
Yes.
No Skylar today. We are discussing local things. No Shannon either. Shannon is out doing superwoman stuff. She just is literally saving lives every day.
Yes.
And so she had just a very important engagement, work-related, and so you know what? You just got me and Dr. Flo, and you're gonna have to deal with it.
Just deal with it.
Sorry.
These are the breaks.
Now, we'll see how long this episode ends up being, but we do have a very special episode, literally a special episode that we'll be releasing in a couple days, actually, from the one of the main reps from the No on A, Measure A campaign. It is a proposed transportation tax, basically, and our friend Ilanka came on and gave an incredible sort of overview on what it is and what's wrong with it. So we're excited to share that. Keep an eye out this weekend for it, and I think you're really it's gonna kind of open your eyes to some of the bullshit happening behind closed doors, and you'll notice some of the names involved in this because they are the very same people that we fight day in and day out on things like Measure O and city council things. Anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of city council, Flo,
Speaking of city council things, here we go.
why don't we talk a little bit about, it's really the issue of kind of the decade of our generation. It's the housing and homelessness crisis here in California, and in particular in Sacramento. Sacramento County's unhoused population now has gotten higher than even San Francisco's. Ever since the pandemic, things, it's, people are ending up out on the street because they can't pay their rents. And it's just getting worse and worse for folks out there. So let's start. Why don't we actually start with a year ago, almost exactly a year ago? Mayor Darrell Steinberg came out with this, huge master siting plan, right? Where they were going to put 20 different iterations of some kind of shelter out, emergency shelter for folks experiencing homelessness throughout all the city. What happened there, Flo?
Well, I think it's important that we kind of start with like how this whole thing, came about. So originally there was this call to for each of the council members to place a site in their district. And so it would have been 8 sites housing at least 100 people. So it would have been 800 beds. And unfortunately at the time, some of the council members just didn't make it happen. And I say that because, as the chair of the Measure U committee, our committee actually heard that call to action and said, this would be a great use of Measure U money.
What is the Measure U committee, real quick?
That's a great question. So the Measure U committee is the community oversight committee that is responsible for making recommendations to the council for how it spends the approximately $100 million or so that comes in sales and use taxes. So anytime you purchase something or purchase like a car or something from a surrounding area but you live in the city, you pay that sales or use tax.
And Measure U passed in what, 2018?
Passed in 2018. It's a permanent 1 cent sales and use tax. And so there's a committee of roughly 15 people that oversee that money and make sure it's being spent according to its purpose, and also make recommendations to the council for its priorities each year. And so one of the priorities we heard from the council was that they wanted to do these siting plans. So we said, that's a great use of the Measure U money. You should spend some money for each district. And we started with just $1 million just to be able to do some of the initial planning for those sites, thinking that there would be additional dollars that came along. And unfortunately, after that call to action came out, there were actually only 3 sites that ever ended up being planned. And one of the council members at the time, Larry Carr, who was from District 8, vehemently opposed the siting in his district. And it was really quite controversial, and there was just a lot of terrible, language and framing around people experiencing homelessness that was used as the rationale for why that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, our mayor sort of rolled this out, and you know what? Like, he has actually put in work on, the homelessness issue. When he first became mayor, there were 100 shelter beds that the city was running. Today there are 1,100, right? So we have 1,000 more.
Yes.
He was, ostensibly trying to expand this all throughout the city, and the impetus being that if you try and open one shelter in one neighborhood or in one district, then everyone in that district gets really pissed off, and they're like, well, why isn't it in that district? Why isn't it in that district?
Right.
The idea being, we do these 20 all throughout every district in the city. People can't make that argument, right? We're all doing our part. But only a couple of more progressive council members actually were interested in this and actually played ball and actually took the planning seriously. The other 6, whose names were not Katie Valenzuela or Mai Vang, went fucking kicking and screaming into this, right?
Yes, and this even predates them, right? The original ask for the 800 beds predates them, and so only a few got up. And so then the mayor, I think, was trying to learn from that. And I just want to, as an editorial note, say this is another example of, the mayor sometimes has these ideas, and instead of running them by people and actually getting community buy-in, he announces these things and then kind of tries to galvanize support behind them. And he did that with Measure A. He's done that several times. And it seems like he doesn't learn the lesson of like, this isn't the state legislature. And I know that's kind of the process of like, you introduce a bill and then you galvanize support. But at the local level, it really is important that you start with the people who are most proximate to the issue and you bring them along in the process so they don't oppose you every step of the way.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to do that, right, sometimes there is an expediency point, that you at least listen when they raise their concerns and then find a way to be able to be responsive. And I have just found in general that has not happened. And so, having witnessed a lot of this, that was what, he didn't, use the Measure U committee as an opportunity to be able to say, here's some money, let's put something behind this. So he could put political pressure. He didn't really work with, the various members and their constituencies to be able to get some support for that. Yeah. So learning that lesson, he then said, okay, rather than having everybody fight over one site in each place, we'll release a list of 20. And that way we'll be able to, say, okay, we're going to work on all of these. And it's kind of the approach of, you can't fight us all, right?
And now you're bringing us to about exactly a year ago.
Yes.
And council members Valenzuela and Vang are on the dais at this point.
Right, exactly. And so that was kind of the lesson learned. There was a plan to do some of this stuff before the pandemic hit, but there were concerns about, what the priorities were going to be. And that unfortunately didn't rise to the occasion, even though it should have.
Right.
So we're still seeing, just in the background, can watch the numbers of people experiencing homelessness tick up as all of this has happened. And so that brings us to, the 20 sites, the 20 site plan. And the idea was that, if you do this, then you won't be able to sort of, be crushed by what people often refer to as NIMBYism or not in my backyardism of, I want you to find a solution to this, but not here, because find it somewhere else. I don't want it in my literal backyard. I don't want it to impact me. I don't like this idea. And so I'm going to oppose any things that are coming that look like they're going to be near me, because that's not a good idea.
Right. And how did this go?
Nothing was built.
Nothing, not a fucking thing.
Not a single thing.
Teresa Clift of the Sacramento T wrote an incredibly extensive piece on this, sort of on this history over the weekend. And then as an aside, like kind of a sidebar, she listed off all 20 of the sites and what exactly happened to them. We don't have to go through every single site, what happened with them, but can we go through a couple of examples
Sure.
of what happened with them? So how about we start with, what was the one in Sean Baby Laloi's district?
Yeah.
There was a city-owned paved lot at Eleanor and Traction Avenues, right?
That's right. Yep.
The council adopted this plan. This was ready and raring to go, right? All he had to do was indicate to his staff, as Tim Swanson, the flack at the city, who used to be a journalist at the Bee. I think he was at the Bee. Anyway, as Tim said, Laloy said to his staff it was, quote, not a priority site, and the thing fucking died. It just wilted.
Yes. Yeah. So unfortunately, like, the council members were essentially just killing these projects, right? Even though there was supposed to be this $100 million siting plan that they had unanimously approved. So something that doesn't always happen in the city, when all 8 council members and the mayor all vote yes on something. Right. So there's supposed to be this agreement. And this is where the ugliness of politics comes in, because you can stand up and say, oh yeah, I support this thing, and then quietly go behind closed doors and kill any possibility of that project moving forward, and not have to face the public accountability of doing so from the dais.
Yep.
And that's the unfortunate part of all of this, was that the devil was in the details and it was in the implementation part. And so they passed the policy and we all get to say, look at me while they're, campaigning for office. Look at me. I'm a champion for affordable housing. I'm a champion for homelessness, while behind closed doors, they're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah. And, it wasn't just Laloe, right? It was all the conservative council members doing this thing. And I think once one office got privy to this concept, a bunch of the other ones, followed through on it.
Yep.
So, just kind of bad faith backdoor politics, right? Another one that I wanted to bring up was, you heard about the Caliber Collision one? There was a plan for a tiny homes location in North Sacramento, and Caliber Collision brought a lawsuit forward claiming that the tiny homes would increase instances of break-ins, vandalisms, and drug use in the area, potentially scaring away customers. I think the grossest thing about this to me is the immediate implication that if you are unsheltered, then you are a criminal.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I guess, there's not much more to say beyond that. Like, obviously, it is incredibly false. It is damaging, and we will get nowhere if we have reactionary businesses being able to throw a wrench into incredibly important projects.
Well, this brings up, I know we've been kind of, talking about this a lot, because we're, you and I are both working on the No on Measure O campaign, but like, this is exactly why it's in really bad faith that the business community has come out to be able to say, hey, we're gonna, propose this initiative, on the ballot in November, to be able to essentially criminalize homelessness and allow people to be able to sue the city, because they've also, their business leaders and business community have opposed every other option that has been presented to them. Whether it's rent control, no, we don't want to do that. Whether it's
livable wage,
it's fine, livable wage, no, we don't want to do that. Whether it's okay, we want to place some people so that they're not outside because you're claiming that the tents and that the camping is the problem. No, we don't want to do that. And it's just kind of like, you can't say no to everything and then come around and say the only thing you're willing to do is spend money on lawsuits. But that's silly.
Lawsuits and sweeps, right?
Right.
And folks who don't know, this is the most, this like company, Caliber Collision, I hope they get there someday. The end of this story is that the lot that was going to go to these tiny homes, it was owned by the city, and Caliber Collision was mad that the city was allowing people to camp there, but the city had to, because Boise decision determines that if you do not have shelter beds, you cannot sweep people off public property if there is nowhere to go, because it is cruel and unusual punishment. So the city, this is so fucked up. It's so fucked up. They leased their land to Caliber Collision so that for nothing, for free, it now belongs to, or is now, controlled by Caliber Collision. So it is no longer public property. And now the cops could sweep people off of this property. None of the folks that were promised housing when they were swept got it. People are in more precarious situations now. It was demonstrably violent, and the city just went along with them on this. That's one of those things that is just so grotesque to me.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is pretty grotesque, because it's like, again, people were able to just sort of smile in everyone's face and then kill things behind closed doors. And none of this had to happen with faces and names, right? It could just happen, under the dark of night, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, if it wasn't for, really fantastic reporting, like, what we have here from Teresa Clift, we wouldn't even know all the stories of why things were happening. And it's, especially
it makes you wonder how many stories we're missing too.
Exactly. and just how much of this is performative politics. And then when we go back to actually being able to do the implementation, we're just killing things. And, it makes me wonder, like, we've done all this work to be able to have the Brown Act for sunshine purposes and all of that, but the sunshine really should be, there's a required report to come back, within a certain time frame of what happened to that policy we passed that had specific directives in it, and where are we with it? Because there should be no way that you unanimously pass a siting plan for 20 sites and none of them get built and none of them are even are really moving forward in the way that they should have. That's outrageous.
Absolutely. So let's bring it forward then, right? The B, to their credits, a year later after this plan, they said, all right, let's take a look at all these sites, see what happened with them. None of them came to fruition. A lot of money was wasted on this, millions upon millions of dollars. And now we're brought to today, this, a month or 2 weeks before election day. Yeah. And we have the city of Sacramento, in particular, the mayor kind of backing this, coming out with a new plan, a pivot. Yes. They no longer, they're effectively scrapping the siting plan. Yes. This $100 million, plan.
And kind of going back to the original plan plus 20 beds, I mean, in terms of the overall number of units that are going to be proposed, because now it's 820.
So yeah, basically the renewed focus is back to building low income housing in the region. Tell me a little bit what this is.
Yeah, so basically they are trying to braid in funding that is state, federal, and private, and that if this is approved, then they'll be able to open in somewhere between late 2023 to early 2024. And so, the idea here is that people will be able to cycle through the 1,100 shelter beds and then move into some of the permanent housing.
Okay. And I mean, 820 new affordable housing units, that's a pretty good start.
All of which will be accessible to people with disabilities, which I really just need to point out is incredibly important.
I didn't know it was all, because I thought there was one place where all of them were, but I didn't know.
Yeah. So well, at least the paratransit, the one that
the one on Woodbine Avenue
is going to have
South
all of them accessible. Yes.
Yeah. Which is incredibly important because the percentage of unsheltered and unhoused folks who have disabilities it's astounding. I mean, it is one of the major reasons you end up on the streets. Mm-hmm. We do not have a safety net for folks, and if you end up with a situation where you have a disability, there are a few options for you. So these units are incredibly important. So I mean, let's take a look at, let's talk a little bit about the money going into this. As you mentioned, federal and state dollars are going into this. That has to happen, especially in a city, because cities do not have much money. Our city's budget is about $1 billion. Our county's is about $7 billion. We can talk a little bit more about that later. There should be a much larger onus on our county for pushing forward some of these major things. But if you want affordable housing, you really, really need state and federal dollars. And that's just the facts, and the sad thing is, what we need is mass social housing in our city, in our state. And we all know what federal politics are like these days. And it's scary because I can't imagine how much political will is there for something like that. But anyway, there is money coming in for these 800 some units. Is this enough?
It's not. And we already know that's not enough, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yes.
And what I think is really interesting is, a little bit about some of the funding for this. So 8 million of the dollars is going to be this loan that's coming from money that normally would have spent on essentially on lawsuits. And I know I have, and on the show we have as well. Really, I have from the perspective of Measure U, but also on the show we have talked a lot about lawsuits that the city pays out often because of police, bad behavior. And the idea that we're just kind of taking that on the chin, that the city's credit rating has gone up, and we're still offering raises and things like that to the police union without really using that as a leverage point of like, you are costing the city money in these lawsuits, and that is terrible. And you're affecting our credit rating, even if we're not paying literally out for all the lawsuits, we have to pay for the premiums. But every time that happens, our premiums go up and it becomes really difficult for us to be, insured as a city. And so the idea that we're actually taking from this fund that is set aside, $8 million is set aside for our bad behavior for lawsuits, and actually investing it in some prevention is really, innovative in a way. And it's the first time that I have seen this type of thing happen in Sacramento. And so I have to give credit where credit is due, that that's a really good use of these dollars, much more than paying for bad behavior after the fact.
That is that's such a public health win. You're the public health expert, but that reads to me as just like, please, more of that. Stop basically having to pay out for your police force's bad behavior, for your frivolous lawsuits against, let's say a potential employee who you want to, perhaps have a lawsuit against, like things like that. Don't do that. Just don't do the dumb shit that will get you all of your huge team of lawyers wasting taxpayer money, and put that money toward affordable housing, which is the thing that's needed right now. It's really exciting. It's only $8 million, but again, it's one of those things. It's a start, right?
Yes. And then there's another, I think it's close to $19 million that's going to come actually from Measure U. Which again, we have been championing spending this money on affordable housing from the beginning. And so it's nice to see a small drop in the bucket coming from Measure U, given that we have been asking for this from the very beginning, from 2019.
That's what I was going to ask. If your committee was like happy with, these 19 million going in from Measure U.
We've asked for much more to be invested. So of course we're happy with the 19 million going in. We I think at one point we asked for as much as 50 million of the dollars to go towards this, and have been, sort of stubbornly rebuffed at every encounter to be able to say like, this is the thing we need to do. And it's really confusing to me why what we were asking for was so controversial, but, and I say confusing, maybe I'm not using it in air quotes, but maybe I'm using it in like, you can't use, it just feels very strange to me that people are using, that our council members are, trying to co-opt talking points to be popular because they know that homelessness and affordable housing is popular, but then are undermining it in the process. And so I, like Sean Laloe, I just don't understand why you would vote for this and then turn around and like undermine it every step.
Can we? So City Council voted on this week, right?
Yes.
And it was unanimous, even with there is a affordable housing building in a neighborhood called Woodlake, where a lot of homeowners are fighting against it. We used the term NIMBY before, right? After the vote, Sean got a little testy. He was like a little like, well, I still don't like this because here's why. Flo, can you share the clip of that?
Absolutely, I can.
With the listeners and viewers. Once again, thank you to Teresa Clift of the Sacramento Tea for recording this the night of the city council meeting.
Let's see. That's the right. All right, sorry, Skylar. Sound. This one, right?
There we go.
Well, I appreciate the advice. Thank you so much,
It's
Mr.
good
Mayor.
advice.
But yes, I might take some blame on my rookiness, but both you and I, we both have gray hair, so we've been around the block a few times.
Sean.
The problem of health and safety is a big concern in my district.
Really?
Really?
Well, of course.
And
What's your point today as we're about to vote for 2,759 affordable housing units? I
so
don't get the
one of
point.
my points is
The man makes me
this is
root for
great,
Darrell.
I'm going to vote yes, but what about the 300 RVs? What are we going to do with that?
We're going to do our very best to get as many of those people into housing with the services that they need. That's
Well,
what
we
we're
have
gonna do.
102 acres of land that's been sitting there for
Okay,
about 2
then
years.
bring back a proposal on the 102 acres, and why don't you talk to Councilmember Vang about it first, which would
In
be
whose
the
district it is?
right thing to do. Councilmember Chenier?
Does that mean I'm done?
Yeah.
of conducting the meetings?
Well, if you want to go on, please go right ahead.
Well, again, I'm bringing you the question:
Oh my God.
safety and health. Where is that going to fit in District 2?
Sean, baby.
Let's have a council meeting out in District 2, and happy to show up with all of our colleagues, and let's focus on District 2. Happy to do that.
Actually, in 2 weeks, we've rented a shuttle so I can take all you guys on a tour.
Good. I'd be happy to go.
It'd be an eye-opener.
I'd be happy to go.
I just want to
incredible.
make sure that everybody knows that it's not all roses and flowers in District 2.
So Sean
We have
Laloy,
to literally think about the underserved people. Just because they don't make a certain amount of
the underserved people.
income annually, we cannot just overlook at them and say, well, they can't file a lawsuit against the city, so who gives a crap about them?
What?
Thank you.
Right.
I'm
He's
done.
talking about the
Councilmember,
underserved
very
homeowners,
quickly, I just wanted
quote
to
unquote.
add one piece to the direction, which
So, folks, Sean Laloy is the council member for Sacramento City Council District 2. He definitely does not live in Sacramento or his
Right.
district. He lives in a different county. Thanks again to the Sacramento Tea. Why don't we just right? We just have to just read her articles basically out loud on this show. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what else we'd talk about if it wasn't for her.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
But anyway, so Laloy is once more doing that old trope, right? That old unsheltered people are criminals. They make us
Right.
unsafe.
Right. And not recognizing that the thing that makes us unsafe is spending money on law enforcement to sweep our unhoused neighbors around instead of actually investing those dollars in putting people into permanent housing. There is evidence, global evidence, that when we think about our basic needs, we understand that housing is one of them. And that if we
Yes.
are able to provide
Maslow.
people with housing, there's no problem that people are experiencing that is made better by sleeping on the street. Not one. I can't think of any. Diabetes, nope. Mental health issues, nope.
Mm-mm.
Domestic violence, no. There's no issue that's made better by anybody sleeping on the street. So why on earth would we not create low barrier opportunities where people can bring their pets, which we understand has a mental health component, and it allows people to be able to connect with another living being? Why would we not allow people who are in the throes of substance use and whatever? I can't think substance use, another one, is not made better by people sleeping on the street.
No.
So
And
I
Boston
just-
University doctors did a report that if you sweep folks, they're more likely to fall either back into addiction or into addiction, and that will result in more
Look.
mental health crises on the street and a higher incidence of
course.
death.
Of course, right? At the end of the day, I know people who are securely housed and gainfully employed who can't make it through a difficult day without a glass of wine at the end of the day. And I'm not,
Hey.
I'm not opposed to a glass of wine. So let me just be really
Same.
clear on that.
It's my wine mug.
And we are okay with that. We are
Mhm.
okay with the mommy wine culture. We are okay with you being securely housed and having your things together and saying, okay, you can enjoy that. But somebody living on the streets who has far more stressors than any of us could ever deal with, their substance use is a bridge too far. And that's the part that really just frustrates me. It's the double standard of it all. It's we are willing to tolerate things that people who are privileged do, but the moment that it shows up in somebody who is living in poverty, the moment it shows up in somebody who is unhoused, the moment it shows up in somebody who is not part of our privileged class, we suddenly have a different judgment on it. It's the same behavior, and that's the double standard of it all. And that's the part that's incredibly frustrating, and the part that we need to really sit down and wrestle with for ourselves. Because I think as a culture, we are far too comfortable with excusing bad behavior based on someone's social status.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't even say bad behavior, excusing behaviors based on someone's social status.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I do think the conversation is finally changing a little bit these days. But there is.
But then Measure O comes up and it's not.
Yeah. Well, Measure O, who I was talking? I was talking to a friend of the show, Mac, the other day about this and about kind of the messaging of the politicians these days. Because in some ways it does feel like the bastards are winning, right? But my argument as the sweet summer child is that I think we've cornered them as far as rhetoric goes. I don't think that people can say the fascist things outright anymore and be widely respected. So they have to co-opt our language. So we're kind of cornering them rhetorically. I think those are potential wins, but what matters is what we do next with that.
Absolutely.
So we're at an inflection point, in my opinion.
I think we are. And I hope that we're in a place where we can take advantage of that inflection point. I'm hoping that what we can do is have these conversations with people who are starting to question what they're seeing around them and the validity of some of the claims that have been mainstream for far too long, and that we're able to interject a different viewpoint there. I'm also just, maybe it's the sweet summer child in me, but I am
our sweet summer child episode. I'm loving this.
Eventually, we're going to get to a conversation about capitalism. Mm-hmm. Because, undergirding so many of these issues is we need to have a real conversation about
profit motive for a need, for housing.
Yeah. Right. And being able to get people beyond their 7th grade reading of Animal Farm, which was definitely for most of us was intended to be propaganda, right? At a time where we weren't even familiar enough with basic economic principles to actually interpret the conversation. And so that becomes the lasting impression.
For a guy who was shot in the neck by fascists in Spain, I don't know why he would write a book like this.
Touche. I mean, the indoctrination runs deep, quite frankly, right? And so much so that I've actually had the experience of being on social media and having somebody make a very anti-capitalist argument and say, I'm a capitalist, but why can't we just take care of people's basic needs before we profit? And I'm like, that's not capitalist.
Also, I would like to see if they are actually a capitalist or if they're a worker.
Yes. And that's the other part of it is there's so much just dogma around this that I think a lot of people actually would agree with the spirit of it, but they're not even willing to have the conversation because they have been socialized to believe that Cuba, bad, right? Any place that has socialism, bad, right? This is the best that we have to offer. There's a lot of dogma that we don't talk about in Americana.
Right.
And I think, and it's killing us and it's harming us, and we could do better. And being anti-capitalist doesn't mean that there's no opportunity for profit or that, like all of these like strange notions that when I have conversations with people, they're like, well, you know, some people are going to do, and don't they just, and I'm like, nobody's saying that. What we're saying is we can cover people's basic needs and we can do a lot of good before we get into the conversation about profit. Profit should not be our primary driver, and it should not be the first thing that we prioritize. And I would just love for us to be able to culturally unpack that and begin to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that was very succinctly put. So I'll circle us back. This passed unanimously,
Yes.
even given Sean's very cogent concerns. And so we do have this housing coming in, this affordable housing. You know, what is the take here, right? I was reading through public comments and I was able to listen to a few of them during the meeting, although I had to step away. But you know, as you know, a public health professional, kind of you looking at this and look, you can feel free to like take the 50,000-foot view on it, like good, bad, mixed bag, good with misgivings. Where do you stand?
I am cautiously optimistic that good things are on the horizon, because otherwise it's incredibly depressing and demoralizing. So I want to be in the place where I'm like, we are in a place where we are going to close to double our housing capacity in a short period of time. And hopefully our listeners and the people who love them are going to be able to participate in this conversation more and really wield some political power to make what is proposed come to actual reality, and not be killed during implementation, because that's what we've seen happen in the past. So I think what the call to action here is that we really stay vigilant about insisting that what's been proposed actually happens, and that we call BS when people start to undermine things behind closed doors, and then we're asking questions during, you know, public comment on items not on the agenda, that we are reaching out, you know, to the B and other places that are like shining a spotlight on this. But again, Sleep Summer Child episode, I am cautiously optimistic that we might actually be able to do something, especially if, you know, and this is a big push to vote and to encourage everybody, you know, to vote, especially if we get some turnover in the council in the next couple of months, which we have several seats that are going to definitely have turnover. And if we can put some political pressure on these neophytes to be able to do the right thing, I think we really can make sure that the implementation happens as it should.
Yeah, I love that. I really hope it does. You know, I have an affordable housing building opening up across the street from where I live in about 2 months. And I'm incredibly excited about that. Like, that is going to ease someone's pain, someone's pain, right? Like, I think there's like 60 units or something. It does not take up too much space, even like these units have like Murphy beds. So if you are actually a low wage earner and you are a bit of a minimalist, like, please look into that. There are places opening up, and I'm just so excited that there are options for folks. This is the answer, plain and simple. This is the answer. And the
we
term
need we need the YIMBYs to get loud as well. Like, we need the folks who are saying like, yes, let's do this where I live. I want my neighbors to be a diverse group of people. We need to hear from you more.
Yeah. And like, for listeners, I think we should let you know that like there's a little bit of a difference between like a YIMBY and then like a leftist like Shimby or Fimby. So you know, social housing in my backyard, public housing in my backyard.
Yes.
This is what a lot of us are fighting for, right?
Yes,
like, this
absolutely.
is, you know, we need this on a mass scale. and we need it in every backyard, because housing should be a human right and not something that you should be fighting to maintain. The YIMBYs, historically, especially in like San Francisco politics, are very often a little bit more like market driven type folks. They're
the gentrifier types.
Yeah, they like to work with developers. They like to, they're kind of on their side. They try to put their feet in both lanes and then just end up failing miserably and ending up in the lanes for the developers. But we need you YIMBYs to be on board with this. We need you to fight with us, alongside us on these things, because hopefully this is something that we agree on. This is housing. Let's put it in, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess my only misgiving is, and I put this in a public comment, just like, via text, is I'm concerned when I see the money leaving the siding plan and going towards this the day after there was a sweep in our city of over 1,000 people in tents. So
of course.
So like, yes, build this affordable housing, but why does the violence continue? These places will not be built for 1.5 to 2.5 years. The violence, you cannot harm people like this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think most frustrating was, I think there was a place in one of the articles that had spent like close to $700,000 to be paved, and then didn't end up actually opening up for anybody to actually be able to
Incredible.
Like that's the kind of stuff that's just incredibly frustrating. The city council also voted very recently to essentially make it so that people can't camp near schools, which is just absurd, because they added schools to the critical infrastructure list.
That was Angelique just doing like 1990s, tough on crime, justice, like just some of the most vile shit she could do to get a few yards ahead in in her run for the Senate.
Yeah, it's all this kind of like, and this is what, we were kind of talking about in the episode where we had, District 5 candidate Katie Maple on. And, one of the questions that we were asking about was like, her endorsement of her. And I'm like, this is the type of stuff that Angelique does regularly that harms people. And that can't be overlooked just because she answers the phone when people call and she shows up for the photo ops. Because the things that she does that are dangerous and are harmful, and she does not deserve a higher
die because of her policy. I don't know how else we can put that fucking shit. Like it literally is. They do.
And her whole women and children thing is like, which women and which children? Because it's not an equity focused initiative. It really is just about like advancing middle class and upper class politics. And so she needs to be called out on that. And I will do it every moment that I have a chance to. And I don't care.
I enjoy watching every second of it. Well,
as Beyonce said, these Karens are terrorists.
That probably was about the Angeliques of the world.
It was absolutely about the Angeliques of the world.
So
it probably was about Angelique.
In herself, yeah.
I believe Mother was listening.
All right. Do we have any final thoughts on this? I think we covered it pretty well for two people, Flo.
Yeah, we did.
Well, I'm feeling
yay
good.
Public health, yay communications. Like,
yeah, funny. Hey, when you and I work together on something, look out.
Look out, world.
Yeah. We will burn it all down. Wait, no.
I mean,
let's
metaphorically speaking.
One step at a time.
We will,
Yeah,
handle
the
our opposition.
metaphorically, not literal. Yeah, this isn't a threat, anyone.
Yes, we will handle our opposition with
Mhm. With aplomb.
with good trouble.
There you go. Well, I think this is a fantastic episode. We're a little under an hour, but like I said, folks, you've got a really interesting interview coming out in the next couple days. So I hope you're okay with losing a few minutes with us. Flo, I'm so glad you were able to join from out east.
I am too. This was really nice to be. I mean, I love being connected to Sacramento when I'm here, and I stand by my, very firm recommendation that Pittsburgh should be one of the sister cities of Sacramento. We got the whole mid-sized city rivers thing going.
Oh.
That motif runs strong, and I think we are often dwarfed by our larger cities in the state, like Philadelphia and the Bay Area and LA. And so I think we should band together as mid-sized cities that are, have an important role to play.
I dig that. The Rust Belt Gold Country connection.
Yes.
Cool. Well, let's end it. Hey, I forgot to do the plug at the beginning of the show, which is what we said we'd do.
We said we were gonna do that. Oh, you guys.
We'll get this. We'll get it down. This is a new thing for us.
Patreon.
Please support us.
Please.
As Flo likes to say, give us money.
Give us money, please.
As little as $5 a month on Patreon. We do have special content. We have special hangouts sometimes. And just, in general, it helps support progressive media, and it helps us be able to elevate some really important things going on throughout our region and throughout the state. So those of you who are patrons, we fucking love you. Those who aren't, please consider it. We also sell merch, voicesrivercity.com/shop. And yeah, that's all. Should we call it, Flo?
Yeah, there's a reason I don't do the plugs, because I just say, give us money.
I mean, that might be more effective. I don't even know.
I don't think it is.
I haven't workshopped this.
I don't think it is.
But yeah, we will see y'all next week. And once more, keep an eye out for my interview with Ilanka Zlatar against Measure A. It is a goodie. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.